Jesse Jackson is about to sit down and join us here. I am a very lucky man. I am sitting between Jesse Jackson to my left and Mike Dukakis to my right. And gentlemen, it is so great to have both of you here. You're both idols of mine. And I can only tell you that it is amazing where we are here in 2012 and where we have come. There was a case to be made for coming together. And I look back now in 1988, where Jesse Jackson and Mike Dukakis were fighting each other for the Democratic nomination. And now, less than 30 years later, we are both here for the first African-American president. And I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Reverend Jackson, how important it is to see that.
Well, first of all, Governor Dukakis deserves lots and lots of praise he and Kitty, because the tensions were very high and the campaign remained civil. After all, the idea of an African-American being on that stage debating domestic and foreign issues and people struggling for advantage to get votes, Michael Dukakis never went down there. He kept the campaign on a high moral plane. Unfortunately, that is not happening now. The idea that they're calling President Barack a liar, you're not born here, you're not an American, you're not a Christian. This is a revival of the lowest of our politics, and that must be rejected in November 6 as well.
Governor, you have seen this on the Republican side. We have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Well, I think that's true, Jeff. Jesse and I ran with a very interesting field of rather familiar names. Joe Biden was one of them. Al Gore was another. Dick Gephardt was another. Heath Babbitt was another. Paul Simon. But I don't remember, Jesse, any of this down and dirty stuff in our primary campaign. I mean, I think we respected each other.
Trying to make the country better. We were working on that. And political leaders must never forget the burden they have to keep people above their fears, not to reinforce their fears.
Remember, Jeff, at the time we were in the last year or two of the Reagan era, there was a lot of polarization. I mean, people kind of think back and say everything was great because he and Tip used to have a beer at 6 o'clock at night. It was not great. There was an enormous amount of polarization and division at the time, and I think all of us were very much aware of this and trying very hard to see if we couldn't take that campaign up a bit. But I think, Jesse, we all respected each other. You know, we had all been doing the public's business for a long time and trying our best to make a contribution. And I often said, I never listened to Jesse speak. And how many debates did we have? About 45. I never listened to him speak without learning something. And I mean that. There was always something about what he said that was well worth listening to and learning from. And I think all of us kind of felt that way. Is that the case today? No, I think Jesse's right.
I think that the tent has gotten more narrow.
Yeah.
And even now, even this is a well-scripted convention, outside of the platform debate, there are 50 million Americans in poverty. And 54 million of who are food insecure. They must be part of the big debate. And really, I think, Michael, when they go to Ohio, it's not a showdown state, 33 counties in Ohio are in Appalachia, which is where Johnson kicked off the war on poverty. It's a great time to expand the base of the national conversation. The good news about opening up in Appalachia, he deracialized the debate. He whitened the face of poverty and took away the sting of playing off the welfare queen with the Horton-type schemes. That Lyndon Johnson had that special genius. I think it should be built upon.
Let me ask you both, and we're here with Jesse Jackson and Mike Dukakis, and it is an amazing time. I don't know if gentlemen, if you've been on many shows together, but this is a privilege for me, and I think for our listening audience across this country. But it is, you know, we have the voter purges and we have these things going on in this country, but we have an African-American president, a biracial president. And this, to me, is something to celebrate. I mean, people around the world, and I know that when you go to Africa, Jesse, and Governor Dukakis, when you go back to your homeland in Greece, people envy this. And I think America really should appreciate what we have been able to accomplish.
We're meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina today. I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, about 90 miles down the road, and went to school in Greensboro, about 90 miles up the road. And we could not have had this new South without the Voting Rights Act. We went to settlement in 65. Blacks couldn't vote. White women couldn't serve on juries in 67. 18-year-olds couldn't vote. Those serving in Vietnam. Students couldn't vote on campuses, residency. You could not vote bilingually. And when those walls came down, you could then have the Carolina Panthers behind the Cotton Curtain, because the curtain was down. Right. You could then have Boeing and Airbus in the South. You could then have Honda and Toyota. We changed America through the marches and the martyrs who raised the right moral questions. And the beneficiaries of that, of those movements, are now rejecting the victories, because cotton is no longer king. Tobacco is no longer fashionable. So the new South of auto industry and athletics and high tech, the direct result of the civil rights struggle. Not governors who block doors, but marchers who build bridges.
Go ahead, Governor.
Is that we're now seeing a new, and I think, Jesse, in some ways, much more insidious form of voter suppression. And it's not just happening in the South. It's happening in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in states where Republican legislatures are deliberately attempting to make it difficult, if not impossible, for poor folks, minority folks, people of color, to vote. In fact, even in the Senate race in Massachusetts, as you know, Scott Brown has been criticizing Elizabeth Warren because a nonprofit, Jesse, based in New York, whose board is chaired by Elizabeth's daughter, has forced Massachusetts to do what it's supposed to do, and that is notify poor people under the motor voter law, as well as members of the National Guard, by the way, for whom Brown says he feels very strongly of their right to vote.
Right.
Another, in my opinion, part of this effort to make sure that everybody is enfranchised, and we got the Republican United States Senator going after Elizabeth Warren on the grounds that she's somehow connected with this effort to make it possible for poor people to vote. You were down here, Jesse, back in the middle of the Civil Rights Revolution.
It's gotten broader, and making it more difficult for seniors with the voter ID. Many of them on fixed income. They could not travel the long distances to purchase, travel to get to the new voter ID, when you can use, in fact, other forms of ID, your bills, as the case may be. In Texas, students can vote with their gun registration, but not with their student ID, for example. And so, and what strikes me is that the court keeps striking them down, but they want to leave the chilling residue of it, because once 1,100,000 PERS in Ohio, 1 million PERS in Pennsylvania, 500,000 PERS in Florida, they intend to shave the margin of victory. So the loser won, the winner lost in Florida.
Remember, the Supreme Court, Jesse, has sustained these laws in the northern states that aren't covered by the Civil Rights Act.
Indeed.
Pennsylvania, 750,000 people that don't have photo IDs. Barack Obama's margin of victory in Pennsylvania just happens to be, in 2008, happened to be 750,000. So we know what's going on here. And in those situations where these were not so-called civil rights states, they aren't covered by the Civil Rights Act. The Supreme Court of the United States has sustained these things.
There's 188,000 people, Reverend Jackson and Governor Dukakis, in places where you spend a lot of time in Philadelphia when you went to school, and where you spend a lot of time as well. 187,000 people who could not have their votes counted. I talked to Governor Rendell today, a former mayor of Philadelphia. There is a Supreme Court decision coming up on this in 2012. So as many gains as we have, their vote could be tainted.
Well, in Florida, the winner lost and the loser won. Yeah. They manipulated prison rolls out of Texas into the confusion in Florida, and the Supreme Court intervened and gave the election to the loser. In 2004, you had dry machines unused in the warehouse and people in line 7 hours in the rain. Dry machines wet people. And this time it's only gotten bigger and broader as an approach to chill the vote. It undermines the promise of our democracy, and that's why we have to vote as never before. We're going to have to overcome the obstacles of that.
We've been talking with Jesse Jackson and Mike Dukakis here on the Jeff Santos Show, coming to you live from the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. Governor, you know, one of the things that you are so a big supporter of is high-speed rail and wind and solar and so forth. And Reverend Jackson, one of the things that I think that is happening here is that, you know, it is time that we start providing jobs in the inner city. You know, we can talk about making in the USA, but I think it's time that we start making those high-speed rail corridors in inner city America, where African Americans and Latinos are the ones that are making it. You know, we have situations where people are coming in from out of state, from white states, getting those jobs.
That may be 4 million jobs that people can't get to. Scott Walker in Wisconsin turned down $800 million in high-speed money. Americans can make the steel in Birmingham and in Pittsburgh. We could lay the rail and build the trains to connect people with where the jobs are. In a sinister way, it's maintaining the closed housing market. They feel if you connect, you also integrate. If you connect Milwaukee to Madison, Madison to Chicago, you open a whole new corridor of economic growth. The governor of Florida did the same thing. Well, Christie in Pennsylvania, New Jersey did the same thing. So this idea is another piece of the genius of Michael Dukakis. The idea of fast rail is our future. It's energy efficient. I mean, I can go to Chicago right now between 4 and 7. It'll take me 2 hours and a half to get from O'Hara to downtown. Fast rail, 25 minutes. It makes you feel stupid looking at the traffic going along a mile an hour.
Jeff, when you go, as Kitty and I did to Europe this past April to explore her mother's roots, and we're on a train from Frankfurt to Paris, 180 miles an hour, 3 hours and 50 minutes, downtown to downtown. Nobody's telling you to take your shoes off. You don't have to check your bags. You don't have to spend $70 to go from Charles de Gaulle Airport into the city. Downtown to downtown in 3 hours and 50 minutes. A little embarrassing coming back to the United States and looking at the kind of rail system we have here. And by the way, in the state that we're currently in, this so-called Atlantic corridor from D.C. to Atlanta is waiting for high-speed rail.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Governor Michael Dukakis, Reverend Jesse Jackson, it has been a privilege. Thank you so very much.
Thank Michael Dukakis in a good way for being a good man. Thank you so much, Michael.